For nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was not so. These are words of Elrond Half-Elven, Master of Rivendell. So what made Sauron so evil that he forged the Rings of Power? And when did it happen? Let's start with who Sauron is. Just like Gandalf or Saruman, Sauron was an angelic being responsible for creating the world. In the world of Tolkien, such entities are called Maya. Before he turned evil, Sauron was known as Myron, and his virtue was his love for order, planning and coordination. After descending to Arda, Myron became the servant of Vala Aule, the great smith of Arda. Myron loved when his work was admired and wanted his inventions to be useful to the world. Internally, however, he was torn apart by ambition, through which each subsequent work had to be better than the previous one. Unfortunately, it takes time, and Myron wasn't the most patient. He was also aware that all of Ilúvatar's children would be given free will, which in turn contradicts his vision of order and harmony in the world. And it makes sense, right? If he wanted everything to be perfectly coordinated and go according to his vision, there could be no free will. Thoughts of insubordination and chaos drove Myron crazy. Ilúvatar's children would have to obey him, and this was guaranteed only by full domination. Myron was impressed by the speed with which Melkor acted. Unlike the Valar who patiently awaited everything, Melkor took matters into his own hands, and despite acting against the will of Ilúvatar, he often managed to achieve his goals. He also didn't care whether his actions were morally accepted by others. Only the effect mattered. This was the main reason why Sauron was finally persuaded to join the dark side. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact date when Sauron betrayed the Valar, but I assume that Melkor's whispers may have affected his mind in the first days of Arda. Myron remained relatively neutral for a couple of years and only followed the new lord when he stabilized his position in Middle-earth for good. This was probably not long after the firstborn of Ilúvatar, the elves that is, had awakened. Until the end of the First Age, Sauron was just a servant of Morgoth. To be true, he was well respected back then, but the real story of Sauron begins after this period, when he was left to survive by himself. As a result of the War of Wrath, which took place at the end of the First Age, Morgoth was overthrown and his Dark Empire collapsed. Taking one of his fairest forms, Sauron paid homage to Eonwe, the emissary of the Valar. Sauron repented and renounced all evil deeds. Eonwe, being just a Maya, couldn't decide about Sauron's fate and ordered him to go to Aman, where the Valar would judge him. Afraid of humiliation, Sauron never made it to the Blessed Realms. He fled to the Eastern Lands, where his lord's followers still existed. For hundreds of years he worked in hiding without giving any signs of his life. Probably at that time he strengthened the faith in Morgoth in the lands of the East, which already formed the basis for a full-fledged army. There is no doubt that he liked it when people obeyed him, and Easterlings have been blinded by Morgoth's words before. Convinced that the Valar had already forgotten about Middle-earth, Sauron chose Mordor as his fortress in the year 500 of the Second Age. Soon after, he began to appear among the elves in the form of a beautiful emissary, Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. Sauron didn't want to destroy the elves, he wanted to dominate them. The elves of the Eregion gladly received him after he promised to teach them the craft of Valinor. For years, the smith from Gwaith y Myrdain, whose leader was Celebrimbor, Fëanor's grandson, worked under Sauron's supervision. At the beginning of the 16th century, when elves reached their highest potential, Sauron ordered the creation of the Rings of Power. Many years later, he will forge the One Ring. But it's a history for a different time.